Yeah, we are on live, and thank you very much for this broadcast in this YouTube channel about education, collaboration, and innovation. And this is a very special um, occasion because we have two international scientists about entrepreneurship and innovation. And the first one is Dr. Gabriela López Torres. Dr. Gabriela, I will present her. She is a professor and researcher in the University of Aguascalientes, and she is working with innovation, competitiveness, and sustainability in different organizations. She's engineer, and she studied in United Kingdom. And our guest from Italy is the Dr. Giovanni Schiuma, and I will read some of his CV. He has a PhD in business management from the University of Rome in Italy, and has authored or co-authored more than 150 publications, including books, articles, research, and other reports and different papers in intellectual capital management, strategic performance management, innovation system, and organizational development. Giovanni is widely recognized for his work on the use of the arts of business, as well as his work on assessing and managing knowledge assets. His recent book, The Value of Art for Business, by Cambridge University Press, represents a path-breaking manuscript explaining how the arts can shape the excellence of the 21st century organization. So this is a pleasure for me and for all the community that we have in this channel, that we name it Innovatubers, because it's the mix between innovations and YouTubers. And this is a very special occasion for us, for all my students and followers here in Mexico and in Latin America. So I like to introduce with one reflection for our guest, and it's about the future of innovation. And I don't know who wants to start, Dr. Gabi, Dr. Giovanni. For you, what is the future of this technological innovation that we are living? I mean, do you believe that this should be the future? We are going to live more changes in technological innovation, or what is your position about this subject?
Should I start, or you want to start, Gabriela?
You want to start. You're the expert in innovation.
Okay, I can start. Well, for sure, the technological innovation, we are experiencing just a peak of a revolution that we are going to live during the century. We entered this century with digital, with the new concept of digital transformation, Industry 4.0, industrial internet of and industrial of internets. So for sure, the technology will continue to represent a driver of transformation, and more we will see the technology entering and pervading our life, both within the organization and during our social and cultural life. So during the everyday life with products and different kind of solutions. The key challenge, however, for the future, when we talk about the future of innovation, is not about if the technology will continue to represent a key driver of transformation, but what would be the characteristics of this transformation. And I strongly believe that in the future, what we will see is more and more technologies that will become more human, in the sense that the technological innovation will be addressed not only to develop some specific function, but to become better to interface with the humans dimension, the human being. And from that point of view, I believe that we will see technologies that somehow will be more adaptable to human being. And if we think, just to give you an example, the breakthrough that the smartphone has represented in terms of evolution of a smartphone, in terms of mobile phone, well, the key innovation is about the user-driven dimension, the capacity of the iPhone to be used or any smartphone to be used by any person independently from the competence that they have. And will be the future of technological innovation, to develop solutions that are more and more close, more and more aligned with the needs and will be of human being, and will be more aligned to the characteristic and the ability of human beings. So that will be the key dimension of the future of innovation. Technology will be fundamental, but what will make the value added will be the capacity of these technologies of incorporating aesthetic dimension, as I like to call them, which I mean for aesthetic dimension aspects that are related to the human being. So think about technologies that will smell, technology that will smile at you, technology that will be very easy to interact with. And this will be the future of technological innovation, in my opinion.
Thank you for your opinion, Dr. Giovanni. Doctora Gabi, what do you think in Aguascalientes, the shift to this new scenario? We are going to use more technology in order to have better jobs and in universities. What is your position?
I like to say that it's totally true that technology is going to be more and more in our lives. And as we can see today with this chat, we are using technology as an immediate way to communicate and cheap, actually with no cost. And of course, in all our jobs, it's going to be integrated. I think I've seen these sustainable oriented innovations. Nowadays, it's more and more developed in industry. And so I think with this new crisis we have, I think government will provide more resources or loans to develop more information technologies. And of course, with Industry 4.0, everything is going to be accelerated. And of course, some companies that already had this in place, like Internet of Things, clouds, and artificial intelligence, and all that, those concepts, I think they are advancing better, because I think we are really in a very, very sad economical position. And they said this crisis is worse than the one in 2008. And I think I've seen that in Mexico, I think around 1 of 3 companies has some development in technologies. So I think we are very back. I mean, we need to accelerate this. And of course, in terms of innovation, we also need to be fast in competing with our, how to innovate faster than our competitors. So I think it's the main question nowadays, with technology, of course. I think Dr. Giovanni is not in camera. Can you hear me?
Sorry. The technological disruption has affected
but just 2 seconds.
It's part of this transformation on velocity of internet. Even here in Mexico, we are dealing with this issue. So this is my next reflection. And I don't know, Doctora Gabi, if you finish in order to pass to the next reflection. Sorry.
Yes.
The next reflection is about this industry for 4.0, that many people in underdeveloped countries like Mexico is moving to more not participate in this new economy. I don't know what's going on in Italy, but here in Mexico, the majority of people live in informal jobs. They don't have any protection, social protection, and more the transaction in this, the majority of Mexicans is outside the economic system, the formal system. So this crisis, this COVID-19 crisis, is affect to us because the difference between the different social levels are increasing. So we are going to facing a new inequality crisis. I don't know what's going on in Italy. And what is the perspective of Mexico and Latin America in this crisis for the Italians? I mean, in your position, I know that you can do a general opinion, but with your observations, Dr. Giovanni.
So in your question, there are two main components: the Industry 4.0, how is going to affect and how is going, or how is already transforming how we operate within our organizations, and the other one, the impact of COVID and how we see from Europe, Latin America. Regarding Industry 4.0, this concept introduced by the World Economic Forum is mainly a label, is an umbrella concept to represent the evolution of smart technologies and the application of smart technologies, first of all in the manufacturing, but more and more in everyday life. And Italy, that has been traditionally characterized by a strong manufacturing sector, is embracing the concept of Industry 4.0, and the government, both at the central level but also at the regional level, are supporting companies in investing in Industry 4.0. The key point is for companies not only to adopt and to integrate new technologies from 5G to 3D printing to IoT and in general digitalization. It is not only about incorporating within the everyday operating processes the new technologies, but it's also about filling the gap of the digital divide, which means that organizations are challenged to build a new culture where technologies can be introduced as a way to improve the productivity. The key challenge with Industry 4.0 that has been addressed internationally is if this technology will take the place of people, of workers, and if this will have serious consequences in terms of employability. Well, for sure, new technology with a strong automatization will replace workers, and this will definitely happen and is already happening not only in the manufacturing sector but also in the service industry. If you think about all the call centers where nowadays you have more and more machine answering to our calls. So this is already happening, but we have to look at this revolution as a way to improve the quality, the generalized quality of life. Hopefully, and this is happening, for example, in Sweden, they are already cutting down the number of hours of workers from 8 to 6 hours per day, which means that basically technology replacing people are releasing people from their work activity and giving them more freedom, more free time. However, the problem, one of the challenge with Industry 4.0 is if this technology on one hand are improving the productivities, but they are also creating more economic divide, more segregation from rich and poor, because the marginal benefit of the application of this technology usually is captured by entrepreneurs, investors, and this is generating more unemployability with the cultural and social tension. And from that point of view, this means that we will need to look for a new economic model that are able to redistribute somehow the wealth that we produce through the implementation of new technologies. On the other hand, the other big challenge is to train people, and probably this is the concept that we can talk about when we will talk about the future of education. We will need to increase the level of competencies of people, making sure that are aligned with the demand that the company, the industry will explicate in the next future. And this demand will be about people that are more competent about the use of these new technologies. And so the traditional worker will not have any place anymore. So this to answer about the revolution of Industry 4.0 and the challenges that this is bringing. In Europe, we are investing in this area, and we are focusing our attention on how we can fill the digital divide, as well as how we can look for different models to redistribute the wealth that the new technologies are generating, avoiding that there is a concentration of this wealth only on some categories of the social actors. Regarding the COVID, well, the COVID has a sign a deep crisis, which was and still it is an health crisis, and in Europe at this moment is getting slightly better, and in particular in Italy, and now it is hitting South America, and I'm aware that also in Mexico you are dealing with this problem, and Brazil as well as United States. So this is a serious issue. Also because there are many experts that are talking about the second wave of the virus that will happen in October, November, because now with the summer period, somehow this illness, this virus is getting less stronger. But with the autumn, this can be back and create a lot of problems. The problem of the COVID has put the spotlight on many different weaknesses that we have as a societal system. First of all, from an economical point of view, the globalization has also exposed countries in terms of supply chain that are distributed around the world. And this issue of the coronavirus has blocked export, import with serious consequences in terms of production, manufacturing unit, as well as economic dimension. And from economic point of view, this health crisis is transforming in an economic crisis. And this is what we are actually experimenting at the moment in Italy in particular, but across all Europe. And this is also something that in Latin America you need to be prepared for. Because the lockdown, a lot of activities had to stop their production, and this has exposed companies financially, and this has created a lot of financial crisis and breakdown of many companies. Many companies went out of business and bankrupt, and this is creating huge financial and economic pressure. So the coronavirus is proving and is stressing that globalization has its own limits, and countries need to understand from a risk management point of view what are their weaknesses when pandemic crises happen and how they can deal with this situation. What is the experience from Italy? Is that during the crisis, which still we have transformed this crisis from health to an economic one, we also experience a lot of solidarity. So people has discovered the importance of supporting each other, rediscovering the solidarity, rediscovering the sense of community. And the main probably message from this coronavirus is that we need to be more aware of the ecosystems that we create, both the social, cultural, and economic system in our nation, in our territories, because from this ecosystem depends the well-being of communities. So we need to reflect how can we build a resilient, robust ecosystem that are able both to be global and then be able to play internationally, but also to be able to absorb shock like the one that we are living with the coronavirus. And hopefully we will have soon a vaccine that will help, but we need also to be prepared, because we could have in the future other pandemic, because the warning about the problem of pandemic is not new. And there is a famous speech from Bill Gates on TED that was already warning about the pandemic and the consequences the pandemic can have on humanity in general and on social, economic system across the world. So I hope that also Latin America will get out soon. I believe, going back to the point of solidarity, we could leverage the solidarity of Europe, which was very important for us. I'm not sure what this can happen, what this can represent, can be in Latin America, but I think, yes, also from economical point of view, Latin America need to think a way to create a kind of support solidarity system and strengthen their infrastructure, the health infrastructure and the business infrastructure. So hopefully this will not be so severe as well as in other countries, particularly in Mexico. But for sure, the COVID-19 is opening up our eyes about the importance, as I was mentioning, of creating new and better ecosystem that can protect community and social health and economic dimension of territories and nationwide. Well, this was a long answer, but for a complex question.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Dr. Giovanni. Doctora Gavi, I know that you are in Aguascalientes, a very close state to Guanajuato. We are living this economic crisis in one specific cluster, that this is the automotive cluster. Guanajuato and Aguascalientes, you know, we have different industries, different companies, and I know that Nissan is very important for Aguascalientes. So this crisis, this new tendency in Industry 4.0 and the new jobs are affecting different local agendas. What is your view, your position about the future of Aguascalientes and this automotive cluster?
Well, actually, my brother works there, and it's been a lot of uncertainty about the future. And they're gonna fire 2,200 people, I think, in the following days, and who knows what is going to happen next. But actually, when Dr. Giovanni was talking about the Industry 4, it's very, very difficult in Mexico these days, and more because the payment for labor is cheap. So then the owners don't want to invest in new technologies because it's cheaper to pay, because in Mexico it's very cheap, the labor. So I think there been like some initiatives, like they call, instead of robots, cobots. So it's like half automatization. They will collaborate with workers, but that's what could happen. They, as was mentioned, they need to develop more risk mitigating strategies, because now we are transforming from offline to online. So, and also, as was mentioned from Giovanni, that we need to collaborate more, learn more from each other. Companies need to have more alliances with the small and medium enterprises, need to go with corporates, and there's an interesting example of this. Have you heard of the dark kitchens? Actually, dark kitchens now are a very good service, and they don't need a very huge installment. They just need to provide a service through Uber and have good food. So these changes are quite interesting, and I think this is promoting more collaboration between, like you say, more human natural connections. So that's what I've seen.
Thank you, Doctora Gavi. This is a very new scenario that everyone, we are facing new challenges. And the next challenge that I want to talk about with you is about the small, medium enterprises, because we share a paper about the future of these small, medium enterprises and how entrepreneurial orientation can enhance the performance of these kind of enterprises. So for you, why is important to be or to have an entrepreneur attitude in order to face this new scenario that COVID-19 is giving to us?
Well, this is extremely important and critical. When we talk about an entrepreneurial mindset, we are talking about the ability to be proactive and to be resilient. The two key characteristics or three key characteristics of an entrepreneur is the ability to accept and take risk, is the ability to spot opportunities and transform problem in something new, and also the ability to be resilient, to be able to fail, but failing also represent a learning process. So building an entrepreneurial mindset basically means to build the capacity of being proactive, to be creative, to be able of spotting of problems and looking to the problem from the perspective where you see the problem, but also you are able to see an opportunity. And this is very important in the time of crisis, because during the crisis you can let the desperation to take you and the anxiety to take you, and you discover your fragility and you become victim of your fragility, or you reflect on your fragility but also on your strength and on our ability to find the best of our resources in time of crisis. And this is what an entrepreneur is able to do, and this is the kind of mindset that we have generally to build across the society. It is not about making someone an entrepreneur. It's more about making people critical, be able to be present to themselves, to reflect on themselves, and to understand they can face any difficulty they can find. Of course, these difficulties has different intensity, different impact. So, of course, there are many different factors that can also impact and leave signs on people, psychology, and behavior. But the key point here, thinking about building this entrepreneurial mindset, is to equip people with an understanding, with a capacity of going through change, going through transformation, and be aware that they could, through this transformation, get better. And this is something critical that probably we are discovering with the crisis. But of course, crisis leave also a lot of tragedy, and we need also to build a cohesion system that help those people that don't have this capacity or somehow are left behind. But again, entrepreneurial culture should be penetrating all the society, and from that point of view becomes very important the education to entrepreneurship that should be deployed not only in adult life, but should become something that we should penetrate and infuse even in kindergarten, from kindergarten on, building up this capacity in young people to be to realize themselves, to find their own energy, to go through transformation, and to look for opportunities, even when there is a crisis happening around them.
Thank you, Dr. Giovanni. For you, Dr. Gabi, what kind of competence we need to develop? I mean, as entrepreneurs, do you remember? Well, I'm very glad because you were my doctoral thesis advisor, and remember we are talking about the future of entrepreneurship and the new competence. So for you, what kind of new abilities need to have the Mexican entrepreneurs? Because it's different to be entrepreneur in Italy or in US, because we are facing many challenges here in Mexico. Not just COVID-19, even security, even many other stuffs that we need to face in order to have a business. So for you, what kind of abilities are necessary to be entrepreneur in Mexico?
Well, in my opinion, I think we really need to have a change in our mindset, because we keep doing things as traditionally they are, and then we expect that same results happen, and it's not like that. And with this crisis, we have new dynamics that we need to adapt, and I think we need to collaborate more internationally. Again, collaboration. And I think this leadership as well, it's very necessary among teams to have more skills in terms of negotiation, project management, even time management. Really, we need to take this opportunity. I mean, this is a problem, a crisis, but it is also an opportunity to really open our eyes and see how bad we've been doing. For example, in university, we just saw that we didn't have anything. We didn't have our processes automated. So what happened? We really were exposed to operate as soon as possible with whatever we have, and that, I think, companies and new business needs to see and have different objectives, because I think, for example, in university we have the goal of internationalization, and at the end it's only a way, it's not the goal. And I think sometimes we invest or buy new technologies just to make something different, but it's not really the goal. And I think we need to change to redefine our objectives and really take technology as a tool and take new mindset to collaborate with other countries, businesses, and have these alliances with all levels of our business. And yeah, it's true. Even in education, we also need to really redefine the goals for our students. It's not only to go out and have a work, it's really to prepare them to be more productive, efficient, and more tolerant and more globalized, to operate in a more globalized manner. So I think with this new crisis, we could change our mindsets with these new dynamics, I think, to redefine our goals. That's what I think.
Thank you, Dr. Gabi. This is a new scenario for everyone, even teachers, entrepreneurs, and especially for the financial support. Here in Mexico, we are living a new phenomenon that the invasion of the economy. I mean, the end of this lockdown in different stages in different countries, but we are talking about the reactivation of this economy. And many people believe that is the back to normal that in the past, but we are facing a new normality. In your opinion, what kind of new businesses are going to born, and what kind of businesses are going to falling down to death? I mean, new scenarios, new business, but some business are going to simply disappear. So for you, what kind of areas are very interesting to invest, to promote, to be entrepreneur, and what kind of areas you say, no more entrepreneur in this area?
Well, it is difficult to say, because I believe all the sectors will still be relevant, but there are some sectors that have been severely affected by the COVID-19, and other that have been even they got beneficial influence. So, for example, the pharmaceutical industry is in this period is benefiting from this particular situation. But also, if we think application like the one we are using, Zoom, so there are a lot of video conferencing and whatever service solution that help to connect virtually and to support community building or conversation or interaction online, they are benefiting significantly. On the other hand, there is the tourist industry is suffering significantly because, of course, people cannot travel around the world, and if we don't travel, the tourist industry cannot make their living. So I believe it is not, I mean, the point is not those industry that will completely disappear because of the COVID-19, but it's more about what are the industry and the companies that will be more severely affected by the COVID, and then they are more exposed to risk of bankruptcy. And for sure, a lot of the all the service industry that are related to people connection, people interaction, they will be affected by this situation. And on the other hand, all the technological companies devising solution to support smart working or in general smart activity will benefit by the COVID, because people are forced to be in their own homes, in their houses, and this of course help through the digitalization to create a connection. The point is where to invest. Well, I mean, I think the key point is rather than identifying what are the key sectors to invest in for the future in relation to pandemic, is more about what this pandemic is teaching to companies in order to become more risk adverse, to become more risk manager, and then be able to better manage the risk. And I think this is the key point to reflect on. I hope the tourism, for example, in Italy, tourism represents a key industry, and in particular in my region, and a lot of companies are at the moment severely affected, and this is creating a huge economic impact, as well as on the commercial activity. Also, the fashion industry in this moment is suffering. So there are a lot of industry all around the world that are suffering, but I don't believe this industry will disappear. Actually, the COVID will help them to identify their weaknesses, and this is what they need to do, and to reflect on their weaknesses in order to be able, in other similar situations, to be able to put in place risk management plan in order to not to be taken unprepared, and be able to deal with this kind of change management, crisis management, and transformation.
Thank you, Dr. Giovanni. For you, Dr. Gavi, that we are living in the center of Mexico, I mean, in very close states. For you, what kind of new areas of investment in this COVID-19 is given to us to Guanajuato and Aguascalientes?
All innovation investments on technology sector, and probably also eco innovations, everything that has to be with sustainability or green industry, possibly, or social investments. I think that would be probably driving businesses. In terms of manufacturing, well, I'm not really sure what could happen. I think the companies that really are able to adapt and to redefine and to enter to this industry and collaborate with others could have better results. I've seen in university, for example, again, so as a closer sector, that, for example, in the Department of Mobility, now they are creating new programs that promote virtual mobility, like the one from the Organization of Universities Interamericana, that association organization from Canada, then all Latin America, they are creating a special program called e-movies. And so apart from just exchanging classes online or virtual classes, they are putting in place certain programs that can habilitate students for intercultural skills or capabilities, so not only the classes, but also other abilities, because I think it is going to be the future, to have these virtual interactions and learning. And so I think the businesses will try to enhance those processes. So I think we all need to improve our abilities in technologies. For example, in university, when all was closed, many professors were not prepared to give classes online. And as I said before, it was a revealing moment how bad we were. And I think that's another potential area, how to accelerate the learning in terms of technology, and the very different providers of technologies that can help us to be more productive in education, for example. I think that would be a very good option in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Gavi. Now we are going to the last subject in these 15 minutes that we have about the education. We are facing transformation even in the universities. I mean, in that university that have a very traditional philosophy and way to teach. I found this YouTube channel last year, and I work in a very traditional university, and many scientists told me, why are you want to share knowledge in YouTube? Is for other thing, is more like an entertainment, not for education. And now is the channel that we have to connect with my students and with you internationally and share to the world. This is an example on how quickly is changing the education agenda in our universities. For you, I mean, what changes are you doing in order to not just to teach, in order to connect with your students? Because it's 1 week facing face to face with our students, and next week online. So it's different to connect with our students. For you, what are you doing in order to connect better with your students, with your classes in your universities?
This is a good question. If we look at the education industry in general, somehow, even if to be the one educating for innovation, is the one that has proved to be more resistant to innovation, because the universities in particular, apart those that have been created digital, but most of the traditional universities are still keeping using their own traditional pedagogical model of teaching in class. The actual crisis has pushed the university as well as schools to explore the use of digital technologies to support the knowledge transfer and the teaching and learning process. Of course, the digital learning is not new, but somehow was relegated to a corner and was used mainly for asynchronous learning, teaching, but where we were not experimenting the use of learning mechanism like the one that we are using today. And I believe the actual technologies are powerful enough to support this kind of teaching and knowledge transfer, which for students nowadays is really beneficial. First of all, because they are millennium, so they are used already to the use of technologies. Second, because this technology can really, as Dottoressa Gabriela López was stressing, they can have also beneficial impact on sustainability, because people have to travel less, you use less facilities, but of course they have also some limitations. So going back to your question, so what I believe is that what we are experiencing is actually the beginning of a revolution that will impact how we work within the universities. And personally, I hope that the digital technologies and the digital learning will massively use in universities. But we need to recognize what are the beneficial and powerful enabling dimension, and also what are the limitations of these technologies. So for sure, we can reach with this technology a huge number of people. We can create learning virtual spaces where we can still keep having some interaction. But for this reason, people, the professor, teacher need to change their pedagogical approach, need to improve their communication skills. It is very different to talk in front of a camera rather than to work and teach in a real on-site classroom. And also how we interact and use the technology to build anyway a form of interaction between the professor, the lecturer, and the students, as well as among the students. So I think this technology will positively impact, but we will need to revise the traditional way of teaching on site. Because if we use more massively, more systematically this kind of teaching, then what kind of teaching and learning process we should have on site? Well, the teaching should not be the traditional one where the professor is telling and talking about his lecture, but has to be more about facilitation, has to be more about critical thinking, has to be more about socialization, about collision or clash of ideas. So I believe that the future of universities should be structured around these three blocks. The first block is record the MOOCs, where the student can find their teaching material anytime, anywhere. We can have synchronous learning, e-learning like the one we are experiencing right now, where the interaction has to be still facilitated in somehow. And then the traditional on-site should be about more using your hands, using your critical thinking for discussion, conversation, facilitation, meeting, and lab work, group work in different ways. This means that the university needs to change and the pedagogical model needs to change. And I believe that we will have in front of us interesting time in terms of revolution of the university system, because this will also replace the traditional model. Because think about big universities that have been also charging big fees for students to attend the annual course, but also the cost for student is not only the fee, but is more the subsistence, all the costs associated to the living in a specific place that can be somehow reduced. So I think that we will experience a completely different model. And from my own experience, this online learning has been working quite well. I've been quite pleased to work using this technology. I hope, even if university have the tendency to go back to the traditional model, but I hope that this will not happen completely. And at least as regard myself, I'm going to try to keep as much as possible these kind of tools, because I strongly believe they can improve and enhance the way how we teach, and create a strong beneficial impact on students.
Thank you, Dr. Giovanni. I have a view of the future, and I don't know, Dr. Gavi, what is your view about this using of technology in your classes? How do you feel teaching through a camera, and how connect to your students?
Well, I think the future concern in this regard will be how to evaluate education, because really it's difficult sometimes with bigger groups and with the students that sometimes don't have a good, as Professor Giovanni was saying, this critical thinking and this judgment. I mean, I think in Mexico, and I think in general in the world, there is a deficient learning at the schools and universities. And I agree that these tools will facilitate, provide more information, examples, but it's information at the end. And so I'm concerned that if we really could go as fast as we need, because at universities we have pressures from certifications, from the processes of organizational structures, professors sometimes that they don't want to use it or they don't see the point. And so now with this new generation, sometimes they are not really willing to have deep knowledge or socialize the knowledge, and that could be an issue to how to evaluate this new education and have the evidence that it's really happening, and that in the end they are really becoming citizens of good, that they can be productive and in the end, because that's the purpose of education, universities. And so that's probably my question today on this area, how to evaluate education.
It's a big challenge to evaluate because, as Giovanni said, we are facing a new pedagogical model, not just technological, even in the way that how we teach and how we connect, because, learning is an emotional process, and we are losing some of this emotional process, only having this digital contact. So this is my... if you have an oracle, you have a tool to see the future of education. I have my own oracle, just reading and having connecting imagination. This week I have a ritual. I don't have my phone on, so I have more time to connect with my imagination. And I have a dream yesterday that I connect to a global classroom. In one single classroom, I just connect with a virtual reality tool, and I teach to students in Italy, in US, in Colombia, in Aguascalientes even, or even in Africa. And this global classroom is going to face new challenges, more social challenges, because education, if is not attached to social changing, social discussion about the liberty, the freedom, and social values, is losing something. What for you is the future of education? We are going to use more technology, or we are going to use more these social connections? And if you have a dream to the future classroom of your favorite classroom in the future, what characteristics will have?
Well, this is a good point. I think the technology hopefully will penetrate more the educational system. But as I was mentioning, there is the tendency from many universities to be resistant and not to change their business model. But the technology is there. The technology will evolve. The technology will improve the way how we can interact in a digital way. So the use of, as you were mentioning, of augmented reality, virtual reality, will definitely improve how we experience and use the technologies. So on one hand, I think the technology will continue to represent and will increasingly represent a critical factor for the education. But the digital dimension has a good dimension, as a positive dimension, but has also strong limitation, as I was mentioning before. And the good dimension is that can reduce space and time. So we are in two different continents, separated by several hours, but we are connecting and we are talking, and this would have been, this is fantastic. But the limitation is that we cannot empathetically really connect. We cannot really socialize. And the learning process is not only about capturing knowledge, capturing information, interpreting this information to build knowledge, but it's more about also interacting, socializing, discussing. And this means that we will need both, I think. We will need both. And the new University of the Future will have both. And from, again, from social point of view, the class will change. My hope for the future is that the work that we are going to develop in the class should be more conversational, more critical thinking, a more discussion dimension, and then depend from the discipline. Could be labs, Fab Lab, could be mathematics, more about developing joint calculation. And then we use the technology mainly as a way to transfer information and to process the information using at the best possible way this digital tool. So both dimensions, to answer to your question, the digital dimension and the social dimension will still will represent critical pillars of the educational system of the future. And this will require an understanding of the limitation and the gains, the positive dimension, and exploit at the maximum the positive dimension and reduce the pains, and then in a combinational way to use both to transform the education and to improve the educational system. And my final comment is that this kind of tools, as you were mentioning before, can also have a significant impact in a poorest country where people cannot afford educational system, and this can help to reduce cost, to reduce the transaction cost, and reach people around the world with good educational system. But this will challenge the universities, because university is in the last decades, they became an industry in themselves. They need students, they charge, and some private universities are making huge amount of money. And the technology, because you can reach huge amount of people, will improve will improve the capacity of education, but will also challenge some of the traditional business model of fee registration and or huge fee applied for attending courses. So we will see a huge transformation. So I believe the educational system in the future will be interested by deep business model innovation, disruptive innovation, and we will see and experience completely new, in particular universities, from probably the school system. This will be slightly different, but in particular for higher education, in particular the university and executive education, we will see huge transformation in the future using technologies and transforming the on-site training that has to become more social, more interactive, more empathetic.
Thank you very much, Dr. Giovanni. And for the last comment, Doctora Gavi. Doctora Gaby, si quiere, no la escuchamos, si quiere.
Sorry. Okay, sorry. I think we need to focus on the main goals of the universities, and I agree that tools are tools. These technologies are ways to accelerate this process. But I think, I mean, we are humans, we are not robots, and at the end we need both. We need like to have more information. Sometimes technology can provide you with more information, simulations, and low cost, and have discussions like this one. But in the end, it's just a tool. And I think in the way that these tools provide evidence that can give us high quality education, it is actually challenging traditional ways of university, because as Dr. Giovanni said before, these universities were protected. They were like the business, really a business, because nobody can challenge them or but nowadays with this crisis, I think they are at risk, because they've seen they are not as fast as other institutions, and I think in the end, the other, with a more automatized process, is providing is getting the goal of high education. I think that's a risk for university, and that's why we need to accelerate the use and integration of technologies. But that's why, again, I think the evaluation of the learning is going to be a key, and I probably all these rankings of universities need to change as well, or in order to have this dimension of virtual learning and all that. That's what I think.
Thank you, Dr. Gavi. We are agreed that university is going to change, and this virtual technology is moving faster than some traditional models. So thank you very much both for this this virtual talking. We are connecting Italy, Aguascalientes, and Guanajuato in just one screen. And thank you very much for all the subscribers that giving us the comments. And I hope you enjoyed this talking, learn about something innovation and different perspective about the future of entrepreneurship and education. And thank you very much, Dr. Giovanni. I know that it's late in Italy, and
Not really very late.
not very, very late, but I know it's late and
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock. But thank you very much for your time, because I know you have a very busy agenda.
Thank you very much, Paco, and thank you, Gabriela. It's always a pleasure to see you both and to be part of this conversation. And hopefully, anyway, next time to have this conversation on site in Mexico with
yes, because we're humans.
Or in Italy.
Overcoming this digital distance. So thank you very much.
Great. Nice to meet you too. And thank you, Paco, and thank you, Giovanni.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hope to see you soon.
Yes. Thank you. Me too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. See you soon. Bye.